Hi everyone, it's Peter Schiff. This is Thursday, January 28th, 2010. Well, last night I watched President Obama read from his teleprompter for 71 minutes. And once again, his speech demonstrates a complete lack of understanding for the true state of our union and the nature of our problems. And his speech was filled with inaccuracies and contradictions. And I'd like to spend a little time going over some of the highlights, or rather the lowlights, of that speech. First of all, he started out by assuring us that the worst of the economic storm had passed. And I could assure you that that's not the case, that the worst of the storm is still in front of us. And the reason it's going to be so bad is because of the policies begun with Bush and continued by Obama that not only created the problem, but are actually exacerbating the underlying economic fundamentals that led to the problem, and we are now in the process of creating a far greater problem. He also talked about the fact that he hated the bailouts. He compared them to root canal. And if he hated them so much, why was he bailing everybody out? He didn't seem to hate it at the time. It seems that now that the public is expressing its outrage, that he's trying to express a similar outrage himself. But he's trying to get out of it by saying that he had no choice, that even though he didn't want to bail anybody out, he had to, because all the experts on both sides of the aisle said that he had to do it or there would have been a depression. Well, that's not the case. I mean, the only experts he was talking to were the experts that failed to predict the crisis in the first place, that said it wasn't happening, that couldn't see it coming even though it was staring him in the face. Many of those experts were instrumental in creating the crisis. Why was he seeking out their advice? Why didn't he look for the advice of the few of us who actually predicted the economic crisis and ask us what we thought? I mean, certainly if the president had asked me, I would have advised against the bailouts. I would have told the president that the bailouts were going to do more harm than good, and I would have advised him to let the chips fall where they may. Instead, we bailed out a lot of companies that should have failed, and we've made the problems much, much worse. Also, the president talked a lot about all the jobs that he saved, all the jobs, the 2 million jobs that the stimulus saved. How does he know that? I mean, where's he getting that number from? I mean, he's just grabbing it out of thin air. Sure, there are some jobs that the stimulus saved, but that's offset by many jobs that the stimulus destroyed, or jobs that the stimulus prevented from coming into existence. The politicians always want to claim credit for the jobs they save, but they never accept responsibility for the jobs they destroy. The same thing with businesses. They point to all the businesses that benefited from the stimulus, but they don't factor in all the businesses that are suffering as a result of the stimulus. One of the elements that the president touched on was education. I've mentioned a lot on this blog how government subsidies and loans are the reason that college is so expensive. Well, the plan that the government announced yesterday is going to make college tuitions rise even faster. What the president wants is more tax credits so that families can more easily afford the higher tuitions that colleges are charging, instead of allowing market forces to put pressure on those colleges to rein those tuitions back in. But also, he wants to actually make it easier for people to borrow money to go to college, because he's saying that you don't even have to pay it all back. What the president is doing is he wants to cap the percentage of your annual income that has to go to meet your student loans at 10%, and to say that after 20 years, you're finished, even if you haven't fully repaid your loans. And if you happen to pursue a vocation that is considered to be a public service vocation, and he didn't really say what those are, I'm sure it's going to be a broad category, that you only have to make your payments for 10 years, and then you're done. Your loan is forgiven, and the losses are borne by the taxpayer. Now, what this likely means is it's going to give a lot of incentive for people who want to pursue these public service type careers, which are generally, I think, lower paying than some of the other careers, and they're going to therefore have a bigger benefit for the loan forgiveness. When you figure that they're going to cap your payments to 10% of what you earn, no matter how little you earn, it's possible that some people in the public service professions might only be paying back a third or less of the money they borrow. Now, what is this going to do? This is going to remove the resistance to taking on debt. Students are going to be even more willing to go deeper into debt when they know they don't have to pay it all back. That means it's going to be a lot easier for colleges to increase their tuitions, which is very ironic because as soon as the president finished laying out this plan, he then challenged colleges that it was about time they started controlling their costs. Well, why should they? He just made it so much easier for colleges to raise tuitions. After all, they can tell the students who are paying these tuitions not to worry because the money they're borrowing to afford this great education, they're not even going to have to pay it back. So who cares? Borrow and pay tuitions. And what we need is market forces in education, not more government distortions that are causing prices to rise. And in fact, the president even further went on to talk about how a college or a high school diploma no longer guarantees employment. And so what the president wants to do is focus more government money on community colleges. And of course, what that's going to do is make a community college degree just as worthless as a high school diploma. See, the problem is everybody's got a diploma now, and so the diplomas are less valuable, despite the fact that we're not actually learning anymore. We're keeping kids in school longer, which simply benefits the colleges and universities that reap the windfall, but the kids are graduating with non-marketable degrees. They're in their eyeballs in debt, and they're in an economy that now has fewer employment opportunities because of all the extra taxes and all the regulations that were necessary to overfund education at the expense of job creation and real industries that would provide employment opportunities for people with or without a high school or college diplomas. Also, the president talked about what he's doing for the homeowner and how his plans are to increase the value of homes, which he says are America's largest investments. Now, homes are not investments, they're homes. But the problem with trying to prop up home values is that there's a flip side. You're making homes more expensive so that if people want to buy homes, they have to pay more money to do it. Well, how are they going to get the money? Well, now, because you're making homes artificially more expensive for people to buy, they need to go deeper into debt to afford it. They need government guarantees. They need artificially low interest rates. They need to be able to buy without a down payment. We need to perpetuate all of the bad lending practices that led to the real estate bubble in the first place. What's good about that? And also, the president focuses on the fact that when his low interest rates are allowing a lot of homeowners to refinance their mortgages and to reduce their payments. Well, that's great for the borrower, but what about the lender? If the borrower is paying less, the lender is earning less. What that means is the value of mortgages are being diminished, which means the bank's balance sheets are being further encumbered because we're reducing the value of their performing loans. That is going to make a bigger financial crisis. That's going to mean that bailouts in the future are going to be even more expensive because we've diminished the value of their mortgages. Also, think about it from the position of the lender. A lot of the lenders are American citizens who have CDs, who have pensions, who have annuities, who have insurance policies that are the owners of these mortgages. And to the extent that these mortgages are collecting lower payments from the borrowers, that diminishes their ability to make payments to the owners of the mortgages. So you're just transferring money. It's not helping the economy. You're transferring money from debtors to creditors. And while that benefits the debtor, that hurts the creditor. But ultimately, it actually undermines our economy because in order to do this, we have to maintain the artificially low interest rates that are at the source of our problem, that are leading to the malinvestments, that are preventing the economy from restructuring in a productive way, that are keeping resources where they shouldn't be. We're subsidizing the growth of government and excess consumption on Main Street and excess speculation on Wall Street, and we're undermining the ability of our economy to restructure in a way that would produce goods and provide employment opportunities. Now, also, the president talked about the spending freeze that's getting a lot of attention. First of all, the freeze isn't going to take effect for another year. Why wait till 2011? First of all, spending is growing rapidly. Think of how much higher spending is going to be a year from now. Why wait till then to freeze it? Why even freeze it now? It's too high. That's like somebody gains a couple of 100 pounds and they go to a nutritionist and they give them a plan to freeze their weight. Why freeze it? We need to lose weight. The government is too big. It's spending too much. We need to cut spending now, not 3 years from now, right now. And of course, the whole thing is a gimmick because it only applies to a small portion of the budget. Maybe 20–25% of the budget is subject to this theoretical freeze when the rest of the budget is growing out of control. So that's not going to reduce the deficit. The deficit's still going to grow. And of course, the reason the president says we got to wait till 2011 to do the freeze is because he says the economy is too weak, that we can't cut spending now because the economy can't sustain it. We have to wait until 2011 when the economy is in better shape. Well, the truth is, because the government is spending so much money, the economy is going to be in worse shape in 2011. And so the spending freeze is never going to be implemented. The truth of the matter is, we need to cut spending right now. That's why the economy is so weak. The economy can't withstand all the spending that we have. We need to cut it, and we need to cut it right now. You know, the president also talked about the fact that he thinks that we need to grow our exports. You know, he has a plan, a 5-year plan to double our exports. He has a national export initiative. And, you know, it reminds me of, you know, the Soviets and their 5-year plans. I mean, we do need to increase our exports, but not because of a government plan. We need free markets to do that. You know, if the president thinks we're going to export more stuff, what? I mean, what are we going to export? What are we going to produce? And with what factories? And where's the capital investment going to come from? You know, none of this is going to happen because of the president's programs to artificially stimulate certain parts of the economy. The industries that would be able to produce exportable goods are not going to get the capital they need. None of this is going to happen because the government's plans are preventing it from happening. We need to get the government out of the way so that we can restructure and so that we can export more, but we don't need a government initiative to do it. We need the market to do it. You know, the same thing with jobs. The government says, President Obama says that he wants a jobs bill on his desk. Like jobs are going to be created by passing legislation. They're not. The only way we're going to create jobs is by repealing all the legislations that are destroying jobs and are making it impossible for the private sector to create jobs. You know, the same thing on the cap and trade or on the environment. The president talked about the fact that we want to have this environmental legislation. That's going to impede jobs. That's going to make it less likely that we can produce, you know, exportable goods. The same thing on healthcare. The president said that we can't walk away from healthcare reform. Why not? When the reform is going to make the healthcare situation worse, why shouldn't we walk away from it? I mean, if it was real reform that got government out of healthcare so that costs can come down, I'd be in favor of it. And we need that kind of reform. Unfortunately, that's not the kind of reform that the president has in mind. His reform is simply going to exacerbate the problem. And, you know, when the president ended his speech, he was very optimistic. He talked about the fact that Americans have always overcome challenges in the past, that we've been through tough times and we've always come through them. The problem is the president doesn't understand why that was the case. The reason our economy prospered in the past is because the economy was strong enough to overcome all the obstacles the government placed in its path. Well, the economy isn't strong enough anymore. It is so encumbered by all of the government policies in the past, the economy is no longer strong enough to overcome these obstacles, especially if you consider the fact that the obstacles being placed in front of the economy now are much harder to overcome. They're much larger than the obstacles of the past. So there is no recovery coming. It's just going to get worse. You know, when the president gives his State of the Union address a year from now, the Union is going to be in much worse shape than it is today. The economy is going to be worse. More people are going to be unemployed, so the unemployment rate is going to be higher. The cost of living is going to be higher. Consumer prices are going to be higher. Interest rates could be higher. Everything is going to be worse. I wonder if the president is going to give the same speech and try to convince the public that if it wasn't for his plan, that as bad as things are, it would be even more horrific if we hadn't stimulated and we hadn't bailed out and we haven't followed his agenda. Hopefully the public will have enough of this and we will finally elect leaders where we can have real, meaningful change, where we can get the government out of the economy, where we can stop embracing and expanding the failed policies of the past, and we can actually pursue a real new agenda where we can shrink government, get government out of the economy, get government out of the price-fixing business, whether it's in real estate or for interest rates, to have the government stop distorting the economy so that we can have the restructuring that we badly need, so that resources can go where they need to go, not where government wants them to go, so that we can be productive, so that we can have a new industrial revolution, so that we can create wealth and create the employment opportunities that are crucial to a lasting and meaningful recovery. Anyway, that's it for today. Take care, everybody. I will blog again soon.